But we'll get started. So I just want to say, first and foremost, hello, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us. I know everybody here. However, for those that may watch this recorded later and don't know who I am, my name is Rabbi Feivel Rubenstein, and I'm the program director for the North Louisiana Jewish Federation. Many of us are aware how highly Judaism places the value of food. With the holiday of Purim just behind us and Passover just ahead, many of us have been baking, cooking, and cleaning in preparation for these festive meals. But unfortunately, for many in this country, having festive meals for the holidays or even regular meals during the week is simply not a possibility. Today, we're here to learn about the 80 million Americans who struggle with food insecurity today and the growing problem of hunger in the country. We'll learn about hunger broadly, hunger in Louisiana, as well as hunger right here in our part of the state. To share with us their expertise, we are joined by representatives from both Mazon as well as the Food Bank of Northwest Louisiana. But before we begin, I'd like to just take a moment to introduce all three of our speakers. From Mazon, and you guys can wave when I get to your name here. From Mazon, a national Jewish organization fighting to end hunger among people of all faiths and backgrounds in the United States and Israel, it is my honor to introduce Paul Sherman and Alexis Miller. Paul is the outreach manager for Mazon. He has more than 6 years of experience in community organizing with both Jewish and anti-hunger organizations. After founding the University of Denver's chapter of Food Recovery Network, he completed a fellowship at their national office in College Park, Maryland. Paul has a bachelor's in religious studies and implements Mazon's priorities on the East Coast and across the country by identifying and developing relationships with Jewish community-based organizations, including synagogues and anti-hunger organizations. Alexis is the senior program manager for Mazon's partnership grant-making program. She has helped to design, launch, and manage both the Quick Reaction Fund and Emergency Advocacy Fund. Alexis brings expertise in strategic philanthropy, issue advocacy and development, and political affairs to the Mazon team. Prior to Mazon, she worked in strategic consulting, focusing on charitable foundations and corporate social responsibility. She brings considerable state-level policy-making experience to Mazon, having worked in the California State Assembly and the Florida State. Alexis holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Florida State University in International Affairs and a Master's of Public Administration from California State University, Long Beach, which happens to be where my mother went. In addition to these two amazing people who are here with us, it is also my honor to introduce Auburn Brasher. Auburn is the development manager for the Food Bank of Northwest Louisiana, an organization whose name says quite a bit about them. They are the primary resource for fighting hunger in the region. They work to end hunger by ensuring a consolidated network of effective food collection and distribution, which will provide universal access to food for the needy of the community. Auburn and her team at the food bank oversee programs such as the Senior Box Program, Mobile Pantry, Kids Cafe after school meals, the Backpack Program, and the Summer Food Service Program, just to name a few. We are so fortunate to be able to hear from these incredible individuals. And to kick us off on our program, I turn it over to Paul to tell us a little bit about the film, This is Hunger.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. I'm really honored to be here. I'm just excited to share a little bit about our work, and it's a really unique opportunity for Alexis and me to share about our work nationally and then also hear from an expert locally in Louisiana. So I'm really looking forward, and I appreciate you all taking the time to learn about hunger with us. So before we play the video, I just wanted to quickly, the Rabbi so beautifully introduced us already, so I can skip that, but I just wanted to introduce the organization and a bit about what you're about to view, and then we'll come back and discuss a little bit. But so Mazon, a Jewish response to hunger, inspired by Jewish values and ideals. We're a national advocacy organization working to end hunger among people of all faiths and backgrounds in the United States and Israel. And the video that you're about to see is called This is Hunger. And This is Hunger started a few years ago when we had a photojournalist travel across the United States and record stories from people who were struggling with food insecurity. And she gathered these stories into an audiovisual experience that originally traveled the country on a semi-truck. And essentially you would walk into the truck and sit down at this long dining table and experience this audiovisual program where you would hear people's stories as if you were sitting at the table with them. It was, as a truck tour, it obviously had its logistical challenges, so it only was able to exist for a period of time. But we since launched it in a space in California near our Los Angeles office. And beyond that, we really wanted a way for people across the country to view this experience and interact with it, which is why we launched the video and the associated digital experience with it. So with that, I'm actually just going to go right into the video. It's about 13 minutes long. I'm going to share my screen to watch it, and actually, just for the duration of while we're watching the video, to make sure that it streams as well as possible, I'm actually just going to ask if everybody could turn off their cameras and make sure that they're muted. And then once the video is done, we'll come back, and if you're comfortable and able to, please turn your cameras back on, and we'll continue the program from there. And I'm also, I'll say one more thing really quickly. I'm going to put a link in the chat to where you can view the video yourself. So for whatever reason, if you're having trouble, with your internet, or if the video isn't working for you, you're welcome to go view it on your own and then come back. And you can also interact with this at your convenience after the program as well.
I was one of these people that thought, I'd work my 30 years and retire and live happily ever after. People don't realize, what you got until it's gone.
My life now as a senior citizen is probably harder than any of our other lives, with the working, the raising of children. We're pretty much isolated here.
My mom's been working 20-something years in the school system. She had the job, everything was fine.
When I was in my 40s and 50s, I had no idea that this would happen. I thought when I turned 65, I would be living a good life.
I always thought I could have a job and be able to progress in my job to be able to provide for my family. And I could list the different skill sets that I had in the military, but a lot of those skill sets don't translate into civilian life.
My childhood was a very beautiful childhood. My mom was used to always getting us what we wanted. It wasn't the best house ever, but it still was ours.
You know how they can be hungry in America? Because they've lost their jobs. They've depleted their retirement savings that they've had. They've lost their homes. For all my life, since I was 17 years old, I've served my country, been responsible, reliable, dependable, accountable. I went to work every day, did what I was supposed to do. And now I'm faced here, worried about feeding my family, and we shouldn't have to do that. It makes me feel sometimes like a garbage can out there just waiting to be picked up and dumped. It really does. All this stress, all this pressure.
I'm a nerd, I collect toys. I've always been a kid at heart. I fell in love with working with kids and helping kids. I wanted to become a teacher, but it's a small rural town. It's actually falling apart. People aren't moving in, they're moving out. The community is getting smaller and smaller. And a lot of my problem is I'm such a family person that I don't want to move away from my mother and my dad.
I feel like I'm not fixing meals that are nourishing. It is not the thing to do, I know. But if you have to have your meds to keep you alive, you're gonna pay for them and try to do the best you can with what food you can get. Makes a person feel depressed. The senior meals are a blessing.
You know, I like to eat. I'm like anybody else, but we're not generally able to afford healthy foods that some people can. When you go and you're used to having food to eat, and then there's nothing there, it's we've got canned food in there that's probably older than me that we've had to open up and eat. Going to bed hungry gives you that feeling that you got to get up and eat. It keeps you from sleeping. Really, it does. It's not a good feeling at all. My mother has nights when she can't sleep either, just of the thought that she doesn't have a job and she thinks she can't provide and she can't live for herself. It's not something anybody would want to go through.
In 1957, at the age of 9, we moved the first time from one plantation to another. When I was a child, we had more food, more meats than I have now. I changed the way I eat because I don't have the money to buy what I used to buy. Now, not being able to feed myself the way I would like to, I cook to fill me up, not so much as healthy. I always tried to eat healthy, and I'm on cholesterol medicines now.
It was very hard at first, like, I don't want to take care of my sisters, but my mom's getting sick and I couldn't work. She got stamps, but with 3 kids, it doesn't last the whole month. Kids eat a lot. We're like, okay, don't eat as much. We have to make the food last.
Don't ever think this can't happen to you or your family. I mean, I had a great UAW job making $100,000 a year almost with overtime. It's gone. It's gone. And all the other things that were attached to it are gone. Health care, life insurance. And now I'm stuck here trying to figure out what I'm gonna do. I used to help people out with delivering food assistance. I'd never lived above my means. We used to go out to dinner a lot, you know, as a family. My wife cooks meals now that'll probably last a few days longer. I mean, never thought I'd be like that. It's a scary world we live in today. It really is.
I never really had to rely on the system to support me that much because I always felt that was wrong. I feel that there's people more deserving of that than me. I decided to apply for food stamps because of my family. I have a wife and a son, and I'm not able with my job to support them. I don't want to have to be doing the food stamp program, but it's for those families that aren't able to make it on their income. We were skipping meals so we could feed our baby.
I have high blood pressure, and you have to be careful for that. But salads and fresh vegetables, we just don't consume unless they are out of a can. I bought a little carton of tomatoes out here to the store not long ago, which was $2.89 for just a few tomatoes in one of them little plastic things. Cut them very small and used very few at a time, just like almost enough to give you a taste.
You don't have an understanding till you're there. But you know what? What happened to me can happen to anybody.
It seemed like to me, once you get a certain age, you tossed aside. I never would have thought America would be like this.
It affects your appearance, it affects how you act, it affects how you work at school. It makes you feel like you're not normal. It really does. It's not something somebody should have to live with in their life. And there are kids right now, younger than me, having to go through it.
Whoever can help with these programs, please do so. Because there's a whole bunch out there, a whole lot of people out there that I'm sure are hungry.
You ever heard people talk about they're standing in line in the grocery line and somebody pulls out the bridge card and they've got a fur coat on? You've ever heard things like that?
I always thought I was, living a pretty fair life.
That comes out to about 90 cents per person per meal. It's less than $18 a day. Hard to feed a family.
And even apply for public assistance. It's not your finest moment when you never had to,
That don't have enough food. And here you have people that have lived their whole lives working in the United States of America that have no food.
No, demand an accounting. Demand that people be held accountable for their actions.
I kind of wish I could scrape up some type of food to get a decent meal.
If I had to add anything to this, it would be to get off of government assistance.
You'll never ever be able to control what happens to you. You can think about it all day long, you can plan for it. The only part you can control is how you react. So get involved, whether it be standing up for what you believe in, demonstrating, advocating, bringing awareness, food pantries, food assistance, healthcare, whatever the case may be. Do something.
From going to a very comfortable life to a struggling life, it made me think there's lots of injustice in the world. Change starts by one person. So I want to be that change in the world.
Great. So if everyone would like to put their video back on and join us. So thank you for, I realize it can be, it's long and it's a heavy subject matter and it's not easy to watch this video. So thank you everybody for letting us share this with you. And I guess from there, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what Mazon's work looks like. I think that we like to preface our programs with this video when we can, because as an advocacy organization, it's really easy to get bogged down in statistics and details that can feel very wonky about what hunger looks like in America. And we think that it's really important to highlight real people who are experiencing this. Obviously, as many of you know, over the past year alone, hunger has drastically increased. And so there are so many more people that are experiencing this. And while these stories were collected a few years ago, they're not ones that are isolated to these few people. These stories are common across the country, and these experiences are common. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what Mazon is doing to end hunger. So our work can really be split into three main pillars. And I'm going to try and keep this very brief so that Alexis has plenty of time to talk, and Auburn as well, because I know that I just want to respect everybody's time. But a very brief overview. Our work can be split into three pillars, which are education and advocacy, strategic initiatives, and grantee partners. So that first one really includes programs just like this. So we believe that the first step is always educating ourselves so that we can educate others, and especially when we go to the polls and things like that, we think that it's important to educate ourselves before we become advocates. And that second boat is strategic initiatives, which Alexis is going to talk a little bit more about, but we're a small organization in the field, and we're always looking for ways that we can sort of have the most leverage, which often leads us to issues and populations that are underrepresented. And so those include veterans and military families, rural and remote populations, such as Native Americans, senior citizens, and specifically LGBT seniors. And we're also beginning to look specifically at single mothers as well. And within that, we focus on nutrition because we believe that, there is a difference between the type of food that people can afford, and that often is the cheapest, and the type of food that is really going to sustain you, and that is, nutritious and healthy. So this third boat is really where you're going to hear a lot more about in a few minutes, but that's grantee partners. So we fund organizations across the country and in Israel, such as food banks, service organizations, legal aid groups. We fund them specifically to undertake advocacy. So they're partners to us not only because they're doing the vital work of influencing their communities and directly having an impact on people's lives, but also because they can bring issues to light that affect their communities that we can then take on as strategic initiatives. So because we are not, feeding people directly, we often look to these partners so that we can learn about which communities are experiencing hunger across the country. And finally, I just wanted to briefly talk about what makes Mazon a Jewish response to hunger. So what makes us a Jewish organization? There are a lot of misconceptions about this. A lot of times people think, we'll commonly hear people say, oh, because Mazon serves kosher meals, or because Mazon is working to end Jewish hunger. But we really want to make it clear we're a Jewish response to all hunger. We are not a response to Jewish hunger. So Mazon, we mobilize the Jewish community to end hunger, and we do our work through the lens of Jewish values. So when we think about, tzedakah versus tzedek, we're thinking about charity and justice, as well as tikkun olam, repairing the world. So we believe that it's our responsibility as Jews to repair the world through acts of justice. And we do that by working to end hunger. So we think that in order to end food insecurity, we need to sort of get to the root causes of what allows people to be hungry in the first place. And we do that through advocacy and through policy change. And so with that, I want to pass it off to Alexis to speak a little bit about her work and what that looks like in Louisiana as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paul. I also, just before I get started, I wanted to sort of echo what my colleague said at the start of this. I'm really excited to be here tonight, and also to hear from a local expert from your region as well. So tonight, I'm going to talk about Mazon's grants program and why advocacy is so important to ending hunger in the United States. And I'm going to provide an overview of our program, our theory of change, and how that's led us to working in Louisiana. Mazon's grants program is built on a simple theory of change, and that's to eliminate food insecurity in the United States and Israel. There needs to be a robust, well-funded, trained, and organized community of anti-hunger advocates that are working to end hunger. So for us, that means focusing on the big federal marquee programs, such as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, which is formerly known as food stamps, WIC, school meals, et cetera, and how they operate on the federal level and how they flow through the states. Mazon's leadership over 3 decades has served to build the U.S. emergency food system's understanding that structural change and working toward that change is a legitimate and necessary means of advancing an anti-hunger agenda. And so as a result of this, Mazon has built broad acceptance among emergency food providers and empower the hunger relief community to view public policy and working for change as front burner issues that are really worthy of investment of their human and financial resources. And this approach began over 30 years ago when Mazon saw an opportunity to make a difference by devoting our grants program to helping to build the foundation for today's anti-hunger advocacy infrastructure. Since 1986, Mazon has supported over 900 organizations, and we've issued about 7,500 grants, totaling nearly $90 million. And by providing seed money and this critical operating support, we've played our leading role in helping many national and state advocacy organizations, legal service providers, food banks and food bank advocates, hunger coalitions, and others across the country establish and sustain their essential advocacy work. And we feel a very deep sense of pride in this history. Beginning in 2018, Mazon, we decided to refocus our domestic grant making on states with the highest rates of food insecurity, specifically the top 15 most food insecure states in the nation. And it wasn't a coincidence that those states also had the lowest saturation of organizations and individuals working to address hunger. After extensive research and fieldwork, what we identified as being the biggest impediment to advancing anti-hunger advocacy in these states, it wasn't a lack of will or a desire to engage in advocacy work, but rather it was a lack of resources to sustain advocacy staff for the long term. And this led to the creation of the Emerging Advocacy Fund in 2018, which invests in new staff capacity so that our partners have the stability and financial security to leverage their local expertise to take on new challenges and to address hunger through advocacy and public policy efforts that are going to achieve that long-term systematic change that are in line with our mission and values. Despite progress in the anti-hunger movement as a whole, resources to support this critical policy work, and especially in rural and remote regions, it's sorely lacking. These underdeveloped anti-hunger ecosystems, organizations in a particular state, which could, if properly supported, generate the communal strength to implement more effective models of addressing food insecurity, currently suffer from a lack of resources and a lack of technical expertise to sort of establish and guide anti-hunger work in their communities. Residents of these rural areas, and particularly seniors, veterans, Native Americans, and other populations really suffer in turn and as a result of that. Our Emerging Advocacy Fund results a continuity of this vision and purpose, but it prioritizes funding organizations in those states and locations with these underdeveloped anti-hunger advocacy ecosystems, high food insecurity rates, and challenging political and social dynamics concerning the nutrition safety net. When we talk about an advocacy ecosystem, which is sort of a mouthful in itself, that refers to the community of economic, civil, and social justice organizations in a community or state, how they work together, their political strength, the difficulty of the political and social environment, and the funds and technical expertise that are available. Our Emerging Advocacy Fund partners represent a mix of new and well-established organizations, including those that are focused on public education, grassroots organizing, policy analysis, and impact litigation. And our field work in each state aims to assess potential partners with a keen eye towards identifying those organizations who are poised through a combination of well-positioned experience, relationships, and infrastructure to identify the unique needs driving hunger in their state and catalyze real and lasting change on a large scale. And so with our support, many of these organizations have hired for the very first time full-time staff that's dedicated to anti-hunger advocacy and policy work, as is the case with one of our EAF partners in Louisiana, which I'll talk about in a moment. And they've also successfully begun driving policy changes that have increased access to food assistance for thousands in their state. We accepted our first cohort of grantee partners in 2018, and I'm now, happy to say that we're in the process of reviewing proposals for our fourth cohort, and we're currently active in 13 of the 15 top food insecure states in the nation. I'm going to speak more broadly about our work in Louisiana because we have Auburn from the Food Bank of Northwest Louisiana, who's going to give you a more localized and on the ground perspective. And I want to make sure that we have time for that. But what I will say is that since the inception of the EAF, Louisiana was a state that we knew we needed to be involved in. And it's certainly one of the more unique states of the top 15 most food insecure states. And so, as I'm sure you all know, the state, Louisiana's largest city is overwhelmingly Democratic, while the rest of the state is trended towards being more conservative. Louisiana is also still very much dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, which is ever present when speaking about poverty, inequality, and public benefits, even after all of these years. When we began our work in Louisiana, it was ranked third in terms of highest rates of food insecurity in the country, just behind New Mexico and Mississippi. That number has since improved. It really has, but with the COVID-19 and the impacts of that, food insecurity, we have no idea at this point how much the state is going to continue to be impacted, and the effects of it will probably linger for years. According to USDA, 1 in 6 Louisiana households with more than 784,000 family members struggles to put food on the table. And 23%, nearly 1 in 4 seniors also face the threat of hunger, which ranks Louisiana as the second worst state in the country on senior hunger, only behind Arkansas. It's also estimated that 1 in 4 children in Louisiana live in households that are food insecure. And in several rural parishes, 1/3 of children are actually food insecure, which is just such a very high number. And to make matters worse, while there couldn't be a more clear need for work in Louisiana, the advocacy community has historically been poorly funded, and advocacy funding specifically has been hard to come by for many of the organizations operating in the state. In our first year of working in Louisiana, we provided financial resources for one of our anti-hunger partners to hire a dedicated anti-hunger policy staff for the first time in the organization's history. Up until that point, that organization had only ever conducted direct service work. So this was a new change for them. And by having that dedicated staff member, it really opened up a ton of capacity for the organization. And another one of our partners was able to sustain an advocacy position that had previously been piecemeal together by various grants that could have run out at any time. And then that position would have to have been sunsetted. Since then, our partners have fought back against proposed rule changes by the previous administration by leading campaigns in the state against things like public charge, which would have fueled rates of hunger and food insecurity among immigrant families. And another rule which would have put harsh time limits on food benefits for those that are unemployed or for underemployed individuals who can't get enough weekly hours. Our partners have also created and sustained a growing statewide anti-hunger coalition, advocated for the state to adopt broad-based categorical eligibility to eliminate the SNAP asset test, encouraged the state to apply for every available waiver around pandemic EBT, improved the state summer food service program, successfully opposed harmful measures that would have exposed SNAP recipients' tax returns to additional scrutiny by legislative auditors, and pushed back on a separate bill that would have encouraged DCFS to impose additional work requirements on these SNAP recipients. And despite all this great work that has been done, there's still so much work to do in Louisiana and beyond. And the goal of the Emerging Advocacy Fund is in hunger in the United States, and it will continue focusing on these states with the highest rates of food insecurity, many of which are rural states without a robust anti-hunger movement or infrastructure. And our hope is that when we leave each state, there will be a larger, more connected body of anti-hunger advocates that are working to address food insecurity. The true beneficiaries of the Emerging Advocacy Fund are the millions of food insecure people that are living in these states who will benefit from the investment in an effective push to address their needs. And in a real and sort of systematic way. Rural areas in particular face unique barriers to achieving food security, including a lack of public transportation, scarcity of childcare needs, lower educational attainment, fewer economic opportunities, and higher unemployment rates than in urban areas. Food insecure residents of rural areas also contend with the stigma that surrounds asking for help and the sort of pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, particularly as it pertains to government assistance programs, which only further complicates efforts to grasp the full scope and the need to advocate for programs and policies to address hunger. The unique challenges that are faced by these populations is what motivates the work of the Emerging Advocacy Fund and our grantee partners. And so that years down the road, the true success of this work will be lessening the burden of inadequate access to nutritious food for those that are currently struggling with hunger. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Auburn, who can tell you more about the really important work that they're doing in your region and how you could also go ahead and get involved in your community. Thank you so much for coming tonight and for listening to us. And if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them at the end of the presentation tonight.
Thank you so much, Alexis. I appreciate hearing what all y'all are doing in the United States and in Louisiana. Here in Shreveport, the Food Bank of Northwest Louisiana actually serves 7 parishes, being Caddo Parish, Bossier, DeSoto, Red River, Webster, Claiborne, and Bienville. With that, when we first started almost 25 years ago, our birthday will actually be next year. We'll be 25 years old. When we first started, we were serving 1 million pounds of food out of our location a year. Last year, we actually served 13.5 million pounds to more than 75,000 children, men, and women in our community. With that, as the rabbi mentioned at the start of the program, we do a lot of that through disaster relief, helping our other food banks, and food banks helping us as recently as the winter storm to bring in water so that we can provide that to our community. We also provide senior boxes, pantry of staple foods go out in a box to approximately 1,000 low-income seniors from the Food Bank of Northwest Louisiana. We provide mobile pantries, after school meals where we work to have the food provided for children who are participating in after school meal programs. We also do a wonderful program, backpack program, where we have the food assembled and the children that are leaving school will take that over the weekends and holidays so they have some food at home. Because unfortunately, many of the children are only getting a good meal at school. So that was another thing that we were very concerned about when COVID struck our area, was that the schools were closed and those children that rely on those healthy meals at lunchtime from their school systems would no longer be provided that. So we got into action and started working with different sites around Shreveport and our 7 parish area to provide meals. We actually provided 57,355 children's meals at 27 different sites from March to December of last year. During that time, as many of the people in the video said, at any time your life can change and be on the cusp of having to need food assistance, which unfortunately COVID was one of those life-changing moments. So we saw a 42% increase in food distribution over our previous year because of that one instance in life. We had 449 mobile distributions where many of our pantries that we worked with were closed because the people that ran those pantries were in the COVID specific, our seniors, people that needed to stay home, needed to be healthy. So we would take the food to places such as our fairgrounds and have people drive through, have their cars loaded with those food donations. With the food bank, we work with 150 pantries throughout our 7 parish region. And what we do is we act as the warehouse. We have the contacts with USDA, we have the buying power to get large quantities of food into the community, and then we disperse that out through all the pantries and the groups that we work with. Every $10 donated to the food bank allows us $100 worth of purchasing power. So we can take what people donate to us and turn that around and make it more and give that out to the community. Wonderful ways for people to get involved locally. Right now, our food bank is closed to outside volunteers because of COVID and mask mandate. So we are hoping to move in the spring to a new location on Mount Zion Road locally, and therefore we hope at that time restrictions will be relaxed and we will have the room to have people in to volunteer safely and distance themselves. We do have some of the moment volunteer opportunity needs. For instance, during COVID, we had volunteers come in, or actually not come in, but we had volunteers call people that were being serviced by pantries and saying, meet us at the state fairgrounds where we're going to be giving out food and providing services like that. People can also host a food drive. They can call. We have a list of most needed food items, and donations are always appreciated and always accepted. And then, like I said, people can always make donations if they would feel so inclined. With that purchasing power, we can then turn that back to the community. Something wonderful about the food bank, if people worry about nonprofit, is 95 cents of every dollar that comes to the food bank is put back into our programs. So we do take our donors very seriously and provide the service that we can in the best, highest ethical situations back to the community. So as the rabbi said, we have our summer food program where we provide meals, backpack program, after school meals, mobile pantries, and disaster preparedness. So those are just some of the ways that we service our community and get involved and help those that need the assistance in the Shreveport greater parish region. And Rabbi, I can turn it back to you if you would like.
Wonderful. Wow. Thank you, all three of you. Really, these numbers are just so staggering, and it's hard to even comprehend what that translates into when you try to picture human beings that are in these situations. I want to open the floor now to any questions. This can be to Mazon or to the food bank. If anybody has anything on their mind after hearing everything we just heard, now is the time. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. Yeah, John.
I think that the Jewish community here is very familiar with the work that the Food Bank of Northwest Louisiana does. We've been extremely active over the years, and I pray we continue to do that. Every one of those projects that you mentioned are ways that I think we've been involved and will continue to do that. So for Mazon, what is the primary way that we in Northwest Louisiana can be involved? Is it primarily, and it's not that I'm going to complain about this, but is it primarily financial? And is especially primarily financial because we're in a pandemic?
Definitely not, actually. There are ways that you can, there are certainly ways that you can get involved in terms of advocacy, and that is really what Mazon wants to do, is make advocacy accessible. It can feel like a very sort of daunting task to talk to your elected representatives and things like that, especially if it's the type of thing that a community hasn't done as much before. But we do have, for instance, on our website, we have a few letters posted that we update our take action page with, sort of depending on what our most urgent asks are at any given moment. So for instance, right now we have a letter on our website that is specifically to urge members of Congress to protect SNAP, the program formerly known as food stamps, in the next COVID relief bill. And with that type of thing, it's the kind of thing anybody across the country can specifically reach out to their representatives. And we encourage you to utilize those tools. And we're also more than happy, in addition to events like this, the type of thing that that I do in my role is work on sort of more specific campaigns if that is something that a community is interested in. So if you wanted to do an actual handwriting letter campaign and send them to your elected officials, then we could definitely look into that. But to answer your question, no, I mean, there's a reason why we do not, charge for events like this. Like, education is a part of our mission, and we genuinely, this is something that we want to do. So as a nonprofit, of course, we always welcome donations, and that is certainly not the only way that you can get involved to make a difference.
And speaking of education, what do you recommend that we do for our kids, like to turn a bar mitzvah year, bat mitzvah year into a b'nai mitzvah year, I should say, into an advocacy year, and have them turn that into a mitzvah project or something? And that goes not just for Mazon, but also for the food bank. What are ways that the kids can get involved?
Yeah, so I'll say really briefly, and then I'll, Auburn, if you want to answer for you, but we definitely, work with bar and bat mitzvah students every year on projects. It really depends on what their interests are. It kind of ranges. A few weeks ago, I worked with a student who wrote an article for his school newspaper, and just to highlight the issue of hunger, and listed Mazon resources, and I sent him other organizations to refer to. Some students host peer-to-peer fundraisers, some do presentations for their classes. So there's definitely ways to both do that advocacy as part of their bar and bat mitzvah project, and they can kind of tack it on to doing something more local in the community, like a food drive or something like that. But where Mazon comes in is sort of highlighting that deeper engagement in terms of more, policy change.
And I would echo what Paul said. We actually had someone that did a fundraiser for their bar mitzvah and asked people to donate and explained why. I sent them lots of information so that they could educate others about how much money the purchasing power has, what they can give back, how they are helping others. Alexis mentioned a lot of the statistics, so I didn't mention them again, of 1/3 of the people that are hungry are children, just like the child that'll be going through the bar mitzvah. So a lot of ways is putting that in perspective, that it can be anybody that needs that healthy food, not just someone who looks like, oh, well, they're homeless and their clothes are torn. It can actually be someone sitting right next to you that you would never know about.
Thank you.
I have a question. With the pandemic and so many people calling in for pickup curbside orders, someone told me that in Louisiana, SNAP recipients are not able to pay for their groceries that way.
That I personally don't know the answer, Ms. Ginsburg. We have someone in our office that is dedicated to working with that program, and that is, of course, not myself. So any answer I would give you would probably not be the correct one, because I truly have no idea. I can find out and then let Rabbi know if you would like.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had also heard from the food bank, from our local food bank, at the beginning of the pandemic, at least, we were told that it was preferable to ask for people to make money donations because of that extra power that you have of being able to spend your money wisely, and to have sources than it is to have us bring food, and especially during the pandemic when it was harder to divvy. So is that still the case?
Yes, ma'am, it is, Rabbi. We do ask people can donate. Unfortunately, that seems to be easy, because then you don't have to get out and you can go to our website and make that donation. And echo what you said, the purchasing power of buying and providing that. We have had people donate food that we put into our senior boxes. During COVID, we were able to secure a large warehouse where people could spread out and pack boxes, emergency food boxes. But unfortunately, right now, you are correct that a monetary donation seems to go faster and farther and easier.
And what about the backpacks? How are we getting those there? Now, you mentioned a little bit, but I'm very worried about our kids who are not always able to get to them. I've been hearing horror stories.
I have been with the food bank for a year and not necessarily worked with that program.
What a great year. Oh my God.
I started in February and then the world came to a halt. But I do know that we we came into action because we were concerned, especially I know during COVID and during the pandemic, that we worked with different suppliers and got people that put together the meals. Parish Taco was someone who did meals, hot meals that we then would say, hey, we're going to be at XYZ location and come pick up those meals. So there was a lot of thought and a lot of effort went into providing that. And then now our staff member, Marlia Walker, is our representative with that program. And I know that she and her people that work with her have been really focused on that and working about getting the food out to the children that need that.
Thank you.
I also just wanted to add to one of the previous questions about education and children, just because I don't think Paul mentioned it, that on Mazon's website, they also have an entire curriculum that has been designed for teaching this topic to, I think it's broken down by grade. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah.
So I would also encourage people to check that out, whether you've got kids or grandkids or are connected to the religious school in any way, shape, or form. Those are resources that can also be really helpful for us to begin to utilize.
So a more, I guess, general question, although hopefully, does someone have some resources we could use to encourage people to give these financial contributions rather than going up to the store and buying food to put in a food drive bin? Because it sounds like that's the better option for the food bank and for the recipients, but it just doesn't have that visual impact of a big bin of food.
I don't necessarily have that specifically. I do know that a lot of the information is on our website where we send people. Our Facebook opportunity is a great way. We also post several times a week of information about what we do, about our partnerships, working together. So right now, I would say that is a lot of probably the visual that we have is the works that we do and put it out through our website, through our social media, especially about COVID, as most did, a snapshot of what happened during COVID and how much the increase needed of food made a large impact in the community.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about at the individual food drive level. If there's some resources on how we can encourage people to donate money. I mean, we understand you're doing a great job, but when we do these drives, we do them at the holidays, we do them through the religious school. People go out and buy food to donate.
Right.
Right. Can I make this is Karen. Do you have 1 second I can say something?
By all means, Karen.
I think you could probably make some type of visual that, okay, here is a certain bin of food. But if you donate, say, for us, $18 or $100, this is how many bins of food it would buy. The purchasing power of the food bank is so much greater than help solve what Rebecca's asking. So that if you did do a drive, people might be more willing to, instead of shopping like I do, going to the wholesale big stores and buying a bunch of stuff, your dollar can go 100 times further or something.
Right.
And we were just educating everybody. We were saying it's better for us not to be out in the stores, and it was better for us not to be dropping off the food and expecting another layer of touching and transporting, and the checks were better. We were doing a thing where we were having people, if they needed to drop off the checks at the synagogues, and then we would transport them, but recognizing that it's better to go directly.
So we're just about out of time here. So I just want to ask one last question for each of you, because this can be such a daunting thing. I mean, the statistics that we just said, that you guys just gave to us are so large. And I feel as though this can often be a very overwhelming task to try to support and help these people. So I'd love to end with each one of you could share with us what's something that you've experienced in your roles at Mazon and the food bank that really gives you hope for the future. What have you been seeing that people have been doing that's really making a big difference and keeping you going towards this fight against hunger? Let's open it up to whoever wants to take that first.
I don't mind starting. For me, it's been seeing the change in these sort of anti-hunger environments that we're operating in. In case of Louisiana or Mississippi or some of these other more conservative states that we operate in, prior to working there was either nobody in the entire state, really that was working on public benefits advocacy full time, or maybe there were just a couple of people. And so seeing that work sort of transform and to have more voices that are working on that issue, I find that to be just so rewarding. And so it's a very long-term game, but we're slowly getting there, and we're laying the foundation for more people to be working on this issue in the future. And I just think that's really great.
And I'll speak locally. It's just wonderful. Like I said, I started last February. And so really my foray into the food bank was COVID and what's going on with COVID. And to see, as Rabbi was talking, people that came out and volunteered and what can I do to help, and how can we get this food to the people that need the food, and what can we do to serve the fellow man, was truly an opportunity to see people looking not just at themselves, but looking at the others and looking at the community as to what they can give back and how they can be involved and make a difference in the lives of others who may not be where they are financially or with food and be hungry.
Yeah, and I think for me, I came to Mazon more from it was more of a direct service background, where I was working for an organization that would recover surplus food from college campuses and from cafeterias and things like that, and donate it to hunger fighting agencies. And so coming to Mazon and focusing more on the policy and advocacy side of things was frankly completely new for me, and I wasn't sure that I had much faith in the government to adequately respond to these needs. And I think there's a lot of work to do, and that's why we're here doing this work, and we certainly have it cut out for us. But at the same time, I think that when we at Mazon have experienced sometimes small wins where we've been advocating for one specific bill to pass in a certain way for months, and to see that bill get passed and millions of people be able to have access to the support that they need in order to support themselves and their families and lift themselves out of poverty is extremely powerful. So I think that's sort of what's motivating me, and also getting to speak to communities like yours and just, I guess, kind of spread the word about what this issue looks like, because it's something that's all around us that we don't necessarily realize all the time. So yeah, I think that's sort of what's driving me.
Well, I just want to say a huge thank you to Paul and Alexis and Auburn for being here with us, and to everyone for joining. I see here in the chat, Caitlin wrote, I had no idea it was that bad in Louisiana. And I think that was probably the case for many of us here today. This was a very, very, very eye-opening program for us, and I feel so grateful to be armed with a little bit more information now. I think the biggest task ahead of us as a community and as a society is to make it more aware, we all now are empowered. We all now have the ability to go tell one more person and share with them what we've learned here today. And if we can all continue to do that and make that pledge to just get one more person aware of the problem, that's one more step in the right direction. I just want to also share with everybody here on the call that we had a donation button available on our registration. All proceeds were going to go to the Food Bank of Northwest Louisiana. Before this program, we had already raised $191, so we'll be sending that over their way. If anybody would like to make additional contributions, you can either make a donation directly to the food bank, or you can go to our website, jewishnla.org, and go to our donation button. And in the comments section, just write food bank or Mazon program or whatever it is, to let us know that that's where you'd like your money to be directed, and we'll make sure your donation gets to the food bank. If you would like to see us do more programming with Mazon and with the food bank, please let myself know, let Rabbi Jana or Rabbi Sydney know, and the congregations can get involved. I think this is just the very, very, very beginning of what can be a really powerful relationship with these two organizations. So again, thank you so much to Paul and Auburn and Alexis for sharing their expertise and for everything that you do for our community and for all communities, not just the Jewish ones, but all communities. And I want to stress that point from Paul in the very beginning. So thank you everyone so much for being here and joining us. And we look forward to being partners in the work to come.
And thank you so much from the food bank for everyone's support.
Thank you so much for having us. It was great to see all of you.
Thank you. Everyone have a great night.
Take care.
Great program.